So we've identified our stakeholders using our mapping, and we've analysed them, and then we've looked at the skills that we'll need, and we're utilising those skills to try and ensure that we manage our relationships with our stakeholders appropriately. That's about choosing the right approach on the type of stakeholder based on their needs and expectations in the situation, and they're all going to differ. It's going to include things such as our communication, networking with them, negotiating with them, and trying to find out how we can influence and persuade them. So let's start by looking at about the needs and expectations. Each stakeholder is going to have concerns that they expect to be met by the business or the person they're working with. For example, a business owner is going to expect its business to make a profit, while the government expects it to obey the law and to pay its taxes, etc. And the importance to the business determines the degree to which we're going to try and accommodate that person's needs, that stakeholder's needs, and how we're going to plan to do it. And some of that will have been done when we determined using the tools and techniques, perhaps Mendelow's matrix, for example, but we will also need to consider or be aware and fully understand their needs and expectations. So when considering the needs, there's fundamentally two types. The rational, tangible needs are pretty easy to spot. I need a product, I need transportation, I need this completing, I need to make an income. Fulfilling these needs is often simply about finding a solution to a problem. I need a product. What kind do you need? How much do you need? When do you need it by? And the solution might be that they purchase it. The second, the emotional needs, are a bit more complex. Emotional needs are about the product service, the service provider, or the organisation, and how it makes the receiver feel good. Do I feel safe and secure that they will get the job done, that it will work? Does it feel good? Do I feel understood? Do I feel loved? Do I feel respected? These things are harder to deal with, but stakeholder analysis and building the rapport and the trust that we just talked about before will help. At this point, it's really important that we try and work with people's problems when serving them and stakeholders, because if we fail to realise how important these tangible and emotional needs are, then we're going to fail to build that relationship. And then there's the expectation, and this is based on the anticipated circumstances and the interaction, and it will vary dependent on the stakeholder. So it could be customer, it could be government, it could be the owner. For the customer, say, in a customer journey, all the steps of that journey, all the interactions with the company, as well as the effects of the purchase, the experience, the practical benefits, and the emotions will be included in those expectations. Say for a customer it needs a delivery, they need it now, perhaps they've run out of something and they're annoyed with themselves that they've left it too late, and they will expect it to arrive immediately. They're going to feel like they're the only customer of importance, and that needs to be managed, that expectation. If it can't be done, you don't want to overpromise it, because it's only going to go against the trust they're building with you. And if you're a manager, or it's a manager and they want something done internally, they're going to know what's needed for themselves. They'll know what their own target is, what their own goals are, what their timescales are. And again, they're going to want it to meet them. You need to manage that and be truthful and realistic if you're to build that trust and rapport that we talked about. Hopefully you've built up what we would call some social capital, so that it's easier to deal with those expectations of people. So in managing those needs and expectations, there will be negotiating, and that can be extremely difficult. It's about getting what you want whilst maintaining a good relationship, controlling your emotions, maintaining good communications, and that takes skill. Effective negotiation comes down to a matter of understanding the situation, type of stakeholder, needs and expectations, and then choosing an appropriate style to negotiate in. There can be a number of approaches for this, and here are some of the most common stances that we can take when we're negotiating. The first is competitive or competing style, and that's where you're saying I win, you lose. This is where achieving your goals is imperative, regardless of the impact on others. And with this style, you need to be careful that it is not a long-term relationship that's important to you, but it helps you with a current or short-term goal. And then it would be effective. It's not an approach for problem solving, but it's a win-lose, and it's accompanied normally with things such as manipulation, threats, attacks, aggressive behaviours, basically. And it may really be necessary when it's a critical situation, emergency situation, or something that has to be done regardless of the costs to your relationship. Another approach is accommodating. What we're talking about is I lose, you win. Exactly the opposite, really, to what we just talked about, competing. Often used when you have concerns about this relationship, or you really need this relationship, and you give the other side concessions in a hope of strengthening the relationship. But you need to be careful not to give away too much too soon. Sometimes it means neglecting your needs in favour of giving the others what they want, so that you can build that trust, gain that momentum in that relationship, and take it to the next stage. Following on from that, you could be compromising, where you win some, they win some. Often regarded as a bit of a failure, really, because nobody really achieves exactly what they want. And inexperienced negotiators are said to resort to it because they don't really have the skills to do anything else. But with experience and confidence in the way you approach it, it can be suited to certain times when we want to negotiate a contract that really suits both sides, and we want to be seen to be continuing to build that trust, or we've already got quite a long-term relationship, so we understand their needs and expectations. Next, we have collaborative or collaborating. I win, you win. Often linked with problem-solving situations or an approach where you want to add value or foster a mutually satisfactory agreement. It can need to be very creative, though, when both solutions' interests need to be met, but the parties are assertive about what their needs are. But if we know they want to cooperate, and we want to build a useful longer-term relationship, but we still managing to meet some of our short-term goals, then it can be helpful. And finally, often not seen as a negotiating style in some respects, avoiding, where both sides lose. Primarily, this is concerned with avoiding conflict, and we'll talk about conflict in the final session of this unit, but can be useful when we've got negotiations that really aren't worth the investment in the time or the potential conflict that could ignite by going through them. So can be seen as postponing or ignoring a situation, and like I say, is only really effective for avoidance or of an issue of something that's not really going to affect the relationship or any of the short-term goals, and where it's not really important to either party. But I think the key is really you shouldn't be avoiding it because you don't want to do it. You should just be avoiding it because you don't see the need or the effort that's worth considering to go through it. So consequently, the picture of burying your head in the sand. If it's chosen to be avoided, then it's not so bad. If you're avoiding it by just procrastinating, then it's not a good style. So in choosing our negotiation style, there's a sort of 4-step process we can go through. And the first step is really just to consider your own expectations and needs. Do you need a long-term relationship, or is it the short-term objective that's your main goal? What is the other stakeholders' influence, power, interest? And what are you capable of doing? It's no good trying to do something you're not capable of doing. What style do you think you can carry off? Can you be competitive? Can you collaborate? Have you got the ability to collaborate? Are you allowed to give things up? Is it worth avoiding? Can you compromise? Can you accommodate what you think they might want? And step 2, what is their style? Because you want to meet their style and you want to be able to match up with it. So what is their style? What are their needs and expectations? Are they going to be competitive, or do they accommodate? Do you think they'll avoid? Are they prepared to collaborate? Knowing what their style is and how you might match up to it is step 2. Step 3 is about what's at stake. Consider the importance of the stakes of the negotiation to you and your organisation. and how urgent it is. How important is it to settle the matter at hand? And step 4, finally, is what sort of relationship have you got with the other side? Are they strangers that will remain such after the negotiation? Are they a new client that you want to continue to work with? Are they a longer standing partner with some sort of strategic importance to your organisation? All these steps need to be considered, and once we've considered them, we can start to think about an appropriate approach. But remember, you won't get it right every time. It is a negotiation, and it takes practice, and you may need to change your style mid-negotiation because some of those things might change. Someone's expectations might be brought down to a more realistic level, and therefore you can change your negotiation. Suddenly the relationship from what you're talking about may become more important, or circumstances could change that suddenly make it more urgent that you get this sorted out. So we need to think about it as we're going through the process. Another key part of negotiation is influence or persuasion. The power of influence, influencing people in certain situations to have an impact, some leverage on them, how to persuade them, often referred to as the art of persuasion. There's many different views on influence and persuasion styles. I've included a number of articles in the resources, but we'll focus on one common one, which is called the push and pull. Push is characterized by extensive use of 3 types of things. So that's activities such as proposing, giving information, and blocking or shutting off other options. So push style influences with convincing proposals that are well supported. So the keys are that there's quality to the proposals, the information given is detailed, and the ability of the person giving the proposals to shut out or put down the other types of proposals. So it tends to be effective when either the recipient has little experience or understanding of the issues and recognises the need for the help. There's no vested interest, and the recipient doesn't feel threatened by accepting the sort of proposals or the ideas. Thirdly, that the recipient recognises the influencer's power base, so they recognise them as an expert or a trusted person. And finally, they trust their motives. So you've built up that trust over a period of time, as we talked about before. The opposing style, the pull style, is more focused on testing understanding, seeking information, and building on these. So to be effective, it's about uncovering the needs, the motives, the aspirations, the concerns of the person you're influencing. And to do that, you need quality questions to test and understand, seek information, and build ideas. It can be used in any sort of situation, but it's particularly effective when the person that you're trying to influence has strong opinions and views. They see a vested interest, and therefore might have difficulty accepting the proposal in a push way. If it is unknown what the person you're trying to influence really finds acceptable, or if you have got a strong power influence but you don't want to use it, so you're trying to steer away from that, you'll leave it as a pull and make them come. If you want the influence to be long lasting, so you're not just talking about getting compliance or a quick turnover, you're on about trying to build a longer lasting influence. And if the relationship between the two parties is new, or there is a history of mistrust, you might want to pull them rather than push them. And also, when push has failed, then moving to pull can be quite a useful tactic. When I say tactic, though, it is suggested that you do not use the two together. If you try and push and pull at the same time, they sort of cancel themselves out and people get muddled and they don't trust what's going on. And therefore, you clearly need to have looked at your stakeholder, done your analysis, decided what style you're going to use before of negotiation before you start this interaction and start using whichever. However, I say you can't use them together. If there is 2 people involved in the negotiation, you can do push and pull, or good cop, bad cop, as would be sort of termed in a lot of the movies. One can be pushing, one can be pulling, and then you sort of double in your influence and the chances that you might get that person to agree or come along with whatever you're trying to negotiate. Finally, we need to consider networking. Networking works with all aspects of business relationships, and business relationships are just easier if we have networked and continue to network with the stakeholders. Because the definition really of networking is the process of fostering the exchange of information and ideas among individuals and groups who share a common interest. And that mixes in with all the areas we've discussed so far. It's key to stakeholder mapping and analysis. That's about identifying common interests. There's the persuasion, the influence and negotiation, which are all about the communicating and the shared information generally. And to be successful, we need to build these networks both internally and externally, for both formal and informal networking approaches. And I think sometimes the internal network, sometimes we spend more time externally networking and not thinking about internal networks that we could be developing with people within our organisation. And we can do that networking in many ways. They can be formal or informal. Formal can involve things such as events, societies, groups, chambers of commerce, networking platforms. Then there's meetings we attend with people, agreeing to do joint research projects or joint projects on other matters. As I said, research, charity work, etc. It's really anything where you've got that chance to sort of engage with people. And it could be as informal as the fact that we might strike up a friendly conversation at a gym, a golf club, a fitness class, which could lead to a partnership or a new customer, as long as it's something where you're engaging people and you're actively networking. But when we're focusing on the informal ones of networking with people we've already identified as stakeholders, it's just about keeping up with people at that basic level of just emails and calls. People fall off the radar if we don't make those calls, if we don't keep up to date. And part of the key point to that is keeping up to date with people, building that rapport and trust we talked about, and keeping records of it. If we keep records of when we last called people, how often we're going to check in with them, whether they like to be contacted online or offline, whether it's chatting through email. So it's that record keeping and remembering how people like to be spoken to and wanting to listen to people, planning your updates and your catch-ups, and remembering that if we're just maintaining that contact, then that relationship isn't going to dwindle and disappear off the radar. Because if we don't contact people and then suddenly contact people out of the blue about something, people are suspicious, and that sort of loses that trust we might have developed. So just to recap then, as we come to the end of this session, overall aim was to understand approaches to partner, customer and stakeholder relationship management. We then said we'd analyse the key skills required to effectively manage business relationships. We looked at the skills on a general perspective and category, and we looked at others throughout the process, and you did an activity based on that. We then said you'd be able to explain the purpose and benefits of stakeholder mapping. And I think throughout this session, that has come out as a main thread through it, the purpose and the benefits. And then thirdly, we were to evaluate the different approaches to be taken when managing partners, customers and stakeholders. And we've looked at a variety of approaches towards relationship management with our stakeholders. So look at the activity. Right then, just this activity to do now then before we move on to session 2 in this unit. I want you to read the information in the resources and research influencing styles. Then do the influencing style questionnaire. That's PDF from the website. You can print that off, do it. And then look at your outcome, consider your outcome and answer the questions in the worksheet to sort of expand on that evaluation of your influencing style. Once that's done, you can upload those, both the sheet and the influencing style questionnaire, and we'll move on to the next session.